Hello, I'm Liam, and this video is the secret mission that changed Tibetan Buddhism. Kamalaśīla, SKT. Kamalaśīla. Tibetan letter F54, Tibetan letter F51, Tibetan letter F8, Tibetan letter F60, Tibetan letter F72, Tibetan letter F44, Tibetan letter F44, Tibetan letter F58, Tibetan letter F74, Tibetan letter F63, Pemé Ngang Tsul. Will, pad+ma'i and Ngang Tsul. C. 704-795, was an Indian Buddhist monk and philosopher of Nalanda Mahavihara. Notably, he accompanied Esecute a Macron NT a RK letter 1E63 IT, a 725-788, to Tibet at the request of Trisong Detsen. Kamalaśīla was a pivotal figure in the development of Indian Mahayana thought, and made a number of original contributions in this field that demonstrated his knowledge of both Buddhist and non-Buddhist philosophies. In addition to this, his role as a missionary for Indian Buddhism and his supposed victory in the Debate of Samye helped shape the formation of Tibetan Buddhism. His work spanned several genres and touched upon different schools of Buddhism, including Madhyamaka, as well as the traditions espoused by Dignāga and Dharmakirti. The film reveals a clandestine operation that profoundly shaped the trajectory of Tibetan Buddhism. Much of what we know of Kamalaśīla's life comes from later Tibetan sources, which are comparatively late and therefore problematic. Tibetan sources refer to him, Śāntarakṣita and Jnanagarbha, as Rang Arjayad Shar Jisum, meaning the three eastern Svatantrikas, indicating their origins from eastern India. Little else is provided as to his life prior to traveling to Tibet. Aside from that, he studied under Śāntarakṣita in Nalanda, and arrived in Tibet at the invitations of King Trisong Detsen after 788 CE after his teacher's death. The early spread of Buddhism into Tibet was a carefully orchestrated endeavor, driven by a clandestine mission. In 793, Trisong Detsen resolved that Mohan did not hold the true Dharma. Following intense protests from Mohan's supporters, Trisong Detsen proposed to settle the matter by sponsoring a debate, the Council of Lhasa, although it may actually have taken place at Samye, a considerable distance from Lhasa. Kamalaśīla was invited to represent Vajrayana, while Mohan represented the East Mountain teaching of Chan Buddhism. Most Tibetan sources state that the debate was decided in Kamalaśīla's favor, though many Chinese sources claim Mohan won, and Mohan was required to leave the country, and that all sudden enlightenment texts were gathered and destroyed by royal decree. This was a pivotal event in the history of Tibetan Buddhism, which would afterwards continue to follow the late Indian model with only minor influence from China. Mohan's teachings were a mixture of the East Mountain teachings associated with Yukwen Shengxiu and with the teachings of Baotang Wuzhu. It is said that following his victory, Kamalaśīla was murdered by three butchers who killed him by squeezing his kidneys. Sources disagree as to whether the killers were assassins hired by Mohan or non-Buddhists, who were against the rise of Buddhism in Tibet. The early 20th century saw a clandestine effort to preserve Tibetan Buddhism, and now we'll explore the Kam dance. There is a Kam dance that retells the story of the Council of Lhasa related to the teachings of Churd. Mohan is generally depicted as of ample girth, goaded by children. Churd is a product of both the Indian and Chinese transmissions of Buddhism into the Himalayas. For a discussion of the Dunhuang fulcrum of the entwined relationship of Chinese and Indian Buddhism, see Van Schaik and Dalton, 2004. For simplicity, the Vajrayana transmission may be characterized as gradual, Chinese, Dunwu, and the Chan as direct, Chinese, Jianwu. It needs to be emphasized that this neat dichotomy in characterization of these two approaches is only valid for the historical context of the great debate between Kamalaśīla and Mohan, and even then it is still open to dialectic. According to the lore of the orthodox, prevailing Tibetan cultural tradition, Kamalaśīla, a scholar educated at Nalanda, advocated the gradual process to enlightenment, whereas Mohan, as a trance and meditation master, advocated the direct awakening of original mind through the nirodha of discursive thought, the cessation of the mind of ideation. The historicity of this debate has been drawn into question by Tucci and Heisig, 1970, Gomez, 1983, and Rug, 1992, though this does not lessen its importance in defining the religious and cultural traditions of Tibet. Kamalaśīla was very handsome and a great orator and historically won the debate, though there are conflicting primary sources and secondary accounts. One hagiography asserts that directly after this debate with Mohan, as Kamalaśīla was making his way down from the Himalayas to the Indian lowlands, he was incited to enact phawa through compassionate duress, transferring his mindstream to animate a corpse polluted with a dangerous infection, and thereby safely moving the hazard it presented to a nearby community. As the mindstream of Kamalaśīla was otherwise engaged, a Mahasiddha by the name of Dampa Sangai came across the vacant body of Kamalaśīla. Padampa Sangai was not karmically blessed with an aesthetic corporeal form, and upon finding the very handsome and healthy empty body of Kamalaśīla, which he perceived as a newly dead fresh corpse, transferred his mindstream into Kamalaśīla's body. Padampa Sangai's mindstream in Kamalaśīla's body continued the ascent to the Himalaya, and thereby transmitted the tshul. The mindstream of Kamalaśīla, upon endeavoring to return to his body, was unable to do so and resorted by necessity to the vacant body of Padampa Sangai. The mindstream of Padampa Sangai continued in this body, and it is in this handsome body that the transmission of tshul was made to Machig Labdrön, his consort. The daring expedition to British India unearthed a hidden treasure that profoundly reshaped the spiritual landscape of Tibetan Buddhism. Darje et al. 1977-1998. p. 7 convey a lineage of transmission and translation of Sila, Sutrayana Buddhavacana and the Six Paramita, viewed principally through the Mahayana teachings of Nagarjuna. From India to Tibet, Pandit in this context denotes a Sanskrit scholar. The daring expedition to retrieve ancient texts profoundly reshaped the trajectory of Tibetan Buddhism trilogy of stages of meditation, Bhavanakrama. Kamalaśīla is renowned for writing 3 texts, all called Bhavanakrama stages of meditation, which summarize and build upon aspects of the Yogacara tradition of Asanga, particularly as pertaining to aspects of meditation practice and mental cultivation, bhavana. The first volume was translated into classic Chinese. Though they had different purposes, Kamalaśīla's 3 Bhavanakramas can be regarded as counterparts of Wang Zai's Dunwu Dasheng Jingli, Ju reflecting one of the protagonist's arguments and strategy during the controversy. The Bhavanakramas can be regarded as one of his best-studied works. All 3 Bhavanakramas have been preserved in the Madhyamaka section of the Tengyur and translated into English. The Sanskrit and the Tibetan versions of the first Bhavanakrama have been edited and translated by Giuseppe Tucci. The Tibetan text of the second Bhavanakrama has been edited by Gashima in 1983. The third Bhavanakrama has been translated by Etienne Lamotte. The 3 Bhavanakramas are Kamalaśīla's most influential works on meditation and their associated practices. All 3 of the texts overlap with each other, and all of them rely on a combination of rational analysis and scriptural citation to establish his understanding of the path of spiritual advancement. Various religious texts are cited in the 3 Bhavanakramas, including the Śāntarakṣita, Ratnamka Sutra, Samudharaja Sutra, L. A letter 1E45 Ka Macron via Ta Macron Ara Sutra, and the Ara T N A Ku Macron letter 1E60 A Sutras. The daring expedition to Dunhuang unearthed a trove of texts that fundamentally reshaped Tibetan Buddhist thought. Sanskrit, Madhyama Macron L. A letter 1E43 Ka Macron Ra Panjika Wylie. Dbu Ma Arjayanji Dka, Grell commentary on difficult points. Sanskrit, Madhyama Macron L. A letter 1E43 Ka Macron Ra Panjika Wylie. Dbu Ma Arjayanji Dka, Grell by Kamalaśīla. There is an ongoing debate about whether Kamalaśīla composed his works in India or Tibet. Tibetan sources, including the testimony of Ba, hold that Kamalaśīla composed the Madhyamaka and the first 2 Bhavanakramas in Tibet at the request of Emperor Trisong Detsen, and that he personally presented the completed works to him, which greatly pleased him. The scholar Birgit Kellner believes these claims deserve to be taken seriously, but not literally. The Madhyamaka, for example, does not receive any reception in India itself until the 12th century in the Munim a Macron L. A letter 1E45 Ka Macron R. A by Abhayakaragupta. The biography of Adisa also indicates that he was the first Indian master to discover the work while in Tibet, and he subsequently sent a copy back with himself to India. A daring expedition to Siberia unearthed ancient texts that profoundly reshaped Tibetan Buddhist practice.